Welcome to the Makelky Leadership Academy podcast, a podcast designed for student athletes who want to enhance their leadership skills, their academic performance, their athletic abilities, and develop into a better version of themselves. I'm your host, Aaron Makelky. If your school doesn't have a leadership class, if you want help improving your leadership capacity, or if you aim to level up your leadership as an athlete, then this podcast is built for you.
Of course, I have brought my friends Mr. Jim Whips. He is the Natrona County Coroner, and then Mr. Lance Nyberg. He started the Natrona County Suicide Prevention Taskforce. So I think we'll just go through and do some introductions, give you some background on how we ended up here, and then we'll go into some prevention and then some calls for action. Okay? Do you want to start, Lance? Who wants to start?
Okay, I can start. My name's Lance Nyberger, and how many of you, first of all, have been touched closely by suicide so far in your life? Just raise your hands if you have. Okay, thank you. Usually what I find is when I start talking to people is that at least 50 to 80% of people we're talking to have had a very close association with suicide somewhere. And yet suicide we don't want to talk about. That's why we're here today, is a big part of it. My 17-year-old son took his life 18 years ago, and suicide wasn't ever going to be part of my life until it was. And it took me about 6 months to truly want to live. I didn't care whether I lived or died. I wasn't suicidal, but I wanted to be with my son, and I wanted to be with my family. And so I was very angry. I was very emotional. And after about 6 months, I said, "Hey, I'm ruining my family. I'm tearing myself up. I've got to make a decision." I decided to live, but with part of that was to do everything I can to help others so that nobody else has to experience this if they don't have to. So you may have run into me in the ninth grade health class, probably. I do a QPR down in there. May have seen you there. But I spent 18 years working with suicide, and I'd love if we get a chance to have questions and talks about things that you guys might want to talk about.
Thanks, Lance. And I'm Jim Whips. I'm your elected Natrona County Coroner. I've been investigating death scenes for probably 24 years now. Did it part-time as an investigator for the office while I did other careers, and then became the coroner about 5 years ago. I've had a storied life, about every kind of career you can imagine, from being a combat vet to working for the federal government to local government to businesses and all that kind of stuff. When I came on as coroner, though, I could have retired, but I had a mission to try and reduce preventable death. And there's all kinds of death that can be prevented, but suicide is the number one most preventable death that there is. And what I found was that this county specific has probably one of the highest rates of suicide per capita in the world. We're not talking about just the state, just the country. We're talking about in the world. We surpass a lot of third world countries in our suicide rate. And then when I get in the weeds and dig even farther, I find that a lot of the issue begins in youth, in the adolescent years. And so that now becomes my focus, is how can we at your age develop the coping skills, the resiliency, the ability to reach out and ask for help before it becomes too late. And so that's kind of where I sit right now. I went before the school board here a couple weeks ago and apparently created a ruckus by trying to open their eyes to the fact that in our schools we don't have a lot of peer-centered programs for you folks that allow you guys to be able to develop those skills and to be able to cut things off kind of in the nub there of catching things and taking care of things and seeking help at the right times. So that's kind of my story.
Okay. So, like I said, my name is Annie Dundas, and my story with suicide prevention happened just 2.5 years ago. And this is the first time I've talked about it in public, which the irony of me staring at my kids' peers it's kind of hard. So this is a very new thing for me. So, my husband died by suicide 2 years ago. And it's very new for me, obviously. So I still try to go and make a difference and spread awareness, even through a lot of emotions. So my husband was Lieutenant Danny Dundas. He was a lieutenant for Casper Police Department for, I think, about 13 years. And he started struggling with some PTSD and had some, work-related trauma. And we tried to get him help. And about a couple months after we were married, he took his own life. And so for the first year, my goal was really just to, be a leader within my own home and kind of figure out how I will, make sure that my children and my family are doing well. But then after that, probably a year after Danny passed, as fate would have it, I was at one of Lance's SPAT trainings, which is the suicide prevention awareness training that is a youth awareness training, or led by youth. And I sat there and I just decided, I am totally not ready to get up and talk in front of people. I'm not ready to do any of this, but I might not be ready for a long time. And I feel like I need to, ready or not, I needed to start doing something. And so I joined the Suicide Prevention Taskforce. At first, I kind of was trying to focus more on law enforcement and how I could make a change with law enforcement, first responders, and mental health. Then that shifted when my position in the district changed this year. When Danny died, I quit here. I was a teacher here for 8 years, and I've been in the district for a lot of years. I'm old. But I was an ESL teacher here, and I just decided that I needed to take a break from teaching because y'all are stressful. But I quit for about 8 months and then went back. And when I went back, I was a tutor for student support services. And so my job now is I go into WBI every day, and I'm the acute care teacher for youth and children, so between kindergarten and 12th grade, that have been admitted into WBI, and acute is like the short term. So I'm seeing kids from around the state, a lot of Natrona County kids on a daily basis that are in there. There's some different ways one can end up in WBI, but primarily for suicidal attempts or suicidal thoughts, or they call it homicidal, but it's more aggressive assaults. And my eyes have just been opened. It has just been a shocking year for me. I'm done with this position after this year. 1 year was probably enough for me. I'm actually going to go work with littles, but it really has changed the trajectory of my life and my purpose. So yeah, that's me. I have a couple kids. Jonah's my son. He is a sophomore here. And then I have a daughter, Brielle, who's in 7th grade at Centennial. And so, I see kids in the room that were greatly impacted by our story. But when Lance asked that question, have you been impacted by suicide? Have you been touched by suicide? Even if you don't know somebody close, I think you guys are impacted by it more than any other generation, because you guys are dealing so often with the early signs of suicide, and you're seeing it so much. I know everyone in this room probably knows somebody who has self-harmed, probably knows somebody who has talked about suicide, or might know somebody that has actually taken their own life. And so it's my intention today that Lance and Jim are trained in the actual suicide prevention discussion. I'm not. It's my intention today to do some of that suicide prevention talk, but also just to kind of empower you guys and have a call for action with what you can do as leaders, what you can do. Maybe you haven't had those thoughts yourself. Maybe you don't even know anybody who has, but you guys are leaders in this school. There's a lot that you can do with just little shifts, little seed ideas. There's a lot that we can do to make a change. So, you want to, yeah?
Okay. I want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about some of the signs and clues and whatever about suicide. There's two things I'd like you to know and remember here is that it's hopelessness and feeling like a burden are probably some of the biggest keys to somebody who might be suicidal. We all need a reason to get up and out of bed every day. When you actually lose hope, there's nothing in your mind that's good that's going on, that is when thoughts of suicide can enter. Now, it's not suicide that's the problem. It's other problems in our life that basically cause us trauma. And because of that trauma, we then think of suicide as possibly a solution to that trauma. Oftentimes, it's not just one thing, but it's 2 or 3 or 4 things happening at the same time that are extreme. And you're focused on that problem. And you're really not paying attention to people around you. I liken a suicidal problem to like going into a tunnel. Before you go into the tunnel, everything is wonderful. The birds are singing, the sun's shining, and everything is great. All of a sudden, you've got this insolvable problem that is really bugging you. It's kind of like going into that tunnel. You're constricted. You don't see life the same. It's kind of like a little bit of depression or whatever. You don't think so much about your friends, your family, whatever. You're focused on getting out of that situation, which is the end of the tunnel. Okay, so that light at the end of the tunnel is basically the solution to that trauma problem. And if you have a couple of problems and you double the length of that tunnel, what happens to the light at the end of the tunnel when you double the length? It gets smaller. It's twice as far out there. You've got more darkness in your life, and you've got less hope that you're going to get to that end of the tunnel where the solution is. And let's say you add another problem in your life that's really bugging you, and you add another length of tunnel to it. Maybe that light that started out fairly big and has gone to small, maybe it even disappears. And you're in kind of a total darkness. You're really not focusing on your friends, your family, anybody else like that. You are so caught up in your own problems. And now, with all of these going on, you don't see a solution to your problems. That's when I think thoughts of suicide might enter your head. Okay, like I say, suicide is basically a trauma that we all have or that you're experiencing. The trauma is different for every one of us. As you look around, we're all unique. You've got your own DNA. You've got your own experiences through life. So no two of us are the same. No two of us have the same problems. And I think a lot of times we wear a mask. And that mask is who we want the world to see. Okay, I'm a jock, I'm a artist, I'm a musician, I am whoever. But really, we take down that mask and show very few people the true inside. I'm a person now that is suffering because maybe I'm dealing with my mom and dad are fighting and there's a divorce or there's cancer or there's something else that I'm dealing with, but I don't show the world that. We kind of hide that. And in doing so, oftentimes we become a little bit different. We become a little more cautious in our dealings with people. Maybe we're living out of a car because we don't have, parents lost a job or whatever it is. And so things are different. We don't put that forward. We put forward who we want the people to see, yet that is a problem that is in our mind and we're dealing with daily. So one of the big things that I really like to push, and I love being here with the leaders of KW, is compassion. It's amazing how much you can change somebody else's life and trajectory just by being kind to them. They don't have to be your best friend. Acknowledge them, look them in the eye, say hi to them, whatever it is. I've heard over the years, like I say, I've been doing this for 18 years. So many people come up to me and say, I was going to take my life, except. Basically what it boils down to each and every time is, I thought I was a loser, I thought nobody knew who I was, and then somebody recognized me. Whether it's calling me by name, whether it's joining me in working on a biology project together, or whatever it is, somehow or another, just some little inclusion, because I'm a nobody and nobody knows me and nobody would miss me if I weren't here. So compassion towards others is absolutely huge, and I will almost guarantee you that you can save another person's life just by being kind. Okay, now, some of the problems with suicide is the stigma between us on suicide. We have come to basically lock suicide in a closet off to the side room somewhere. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to know about it, and certainly we don't want to be involved in it. We don't want to say the word, and so we just kind of push it to the side. Doing that, we'll never learn anything about it, we'll never understand it, and we'll never be able to deal with people. So my hope whenever I do this is to kind of educate people and say, it's okay to talk about these things, because if we don't, nothing's going to change. Jim's probably going to talk a little bit about statistics, and already has a little bit. But one of the things I want to mention is that the surveys show that in Wyoming teenagers, middle school, high school, Wyoming kids, 1 out of 5 has seriously considered suicide in the past year. 1 out of 9 has attempted suicide in the past year. So that's a huge number. You go into a class of 30, and that means 3 kids in there, likely on average, may have attempted suicide within the last year. That's huge. And that 5 or 6 of those kids are seriously or have seriously considered suicide within the last year. Suicide, growing up is a tough thing, and especially being a teenager. You're not a kid, you're not an adult. The adults expect you to act like an adult. Heck, I still feel like a kid. And so we're kind of in this in-between age, and it's really, really hard. But what we want is really the best for everybody. And we can't see the future. We have not experienced a lot of life where we know that if this happens, well, okay, then likely something else might happen down the road. We see the future so far out, and that's it. But I truly believe that you guys are the people who are going to make the difference in this world. We have got a lot of great things in this country, places, things that you can do. You guys can be the ones that accomplish that. But you need to step up and take the steps to be leaders, which apparently you are, and I'm just thrilled about that. Some of the things about suicide, we don't talk about it generally direct. It's more kind of an offhand thing. Who cares if I'm here anyway? You're not going to have to worry about me much longer. Here's my iPad. I'm not going to need it any longer. And sometimes we hear these things and we just kind of blow them off. What I'd like to do is see people follow up on those. You're not going to need to worry about me much longer. Why? Well, I'm moving 2 weeks from now and I'm going to be in Texas or whatever. Great, good luck to you. I hope all goes well. Or, why are you not going to be around much longer? Well, life just kind of sucks right now. Why? Well, I got these problems. I don't really want to talk about it. Could you be thinking about taking your life? Whoa. Now we're getting down to the basics here. Yeah, maybe I am. I've got to say that all of the people I've talked to, and I've dealt with people who've attempted, I've dealt with people who've lost loved ones, and people who are thinking about it. None of them that I've met really want to die. They've got pain, they've got problems, they've got life situations that they can't deal with. They don't understand how to get through this time period in life. And somehow, in that darkness, in that struggle, suicide may come up as a thought of, I just can't stand the pain anymore. I can't stand not knowing and dealing with this, and I can't see a way out.
Lance,
this
do you mind
is
if I
all-
ask them a question real quick?
Please do.
Okay. So before I got into all of this, I didn't know this first step. Lance is kind of talking you through a strategy called QPR. And the first part of that is that questioning. And before I did this, I had no clue how to communicate with this topic at all. But I'm curious, you all don't have to answer this, but did you know that the best practice for this or the I don't know if best practice is the way. The most recommended way to approach the topic is to flat out ask somebody, are you hurt? Are you mentally hurt? Have you considered hurting yourself? Do you feel hopeless? I would have thought more kind of, dancing around the topic a little bit and diverting attention or something like that. But do you all know that? Do you know that first step is a direct question? No? Yeah. That's something I didn't know either. So we really want to, encourage you guys that it's okay. It's okay to talk about, and it's okay to ask somebody that.
Yes, and actually, the recommendation is to be extremely direct. Not even, are you hurt? Are you thinking about killing yourself? One guy asked the hurt question. I don't know if Annie's heard this before, and he said, no. Why would I want to hurt myself? I want to kill myself. I don't want to be a vegetable laid up in a hospital the rest of my life. So the question is very direct, and you do it, of course, on your own in a quiet space. I'm concerned about you. I've heard you talking about some of these things, like nobody cares, and what's it matter if you're here anyway? And you've been coming to class late, and you just aren't sitting with us anymore. Things are changing. You're not your good old self. Could it be you're thinking about taking your life? It's that direct, because that's a yes or no answer. It is hard to say. It's hard to do. But that way you get right down to the basis of the situation right away, and yes, you are, no, you're not. At the very least, if you ask that question and just out of nervousness or whatever, they say, no, I'm not, I'll guarantee you have planted a seed in that person, and they will think about it. And they will think about it if they're considering thoughts of suicide anyway. Just about everybody, 90+% of people who are thinking about suicide want help. Yet it's uncomfortable because of the stigma of suicide to ask for help. We can't read your minds. We can't tell where you are in your life's journey and what's going on in your life. So the big thing is we need to get to the bottom of it, and get to the bottom of it quick. So asking very directly, I see these problems in your life. I see these changes in your life. I hear you talking about things in a little bit different tone than you have before. Could it be that you're thinking about suicide? Even if they say no, you've planted a seed. And I'll guarantee you that they will likely come back to you. If they don't answer that question yes then, and they're thinking about suicide, they will likely come back to you another time, because they don't want to die. They want help, but we don't know how to ask for help. Okay, so it's uncomfortable, but I'll guarantee you I would do anything in the world to get my son back. Been 18 years. There isn't a day I don't think about my son. Going to a funeral of a young one or anybody that is always hard. I would put myself out in that position anytime, any day, not even knowing where I'm going, but trying to say, if you need help, I'm here to help you. And how can you help? Real quickly, your help is to get them to a professional who can help them. Okay? Let's go down and let's talk to the counselor. Do you have a favorite teacher that you'd like to talk to? Let's do that. Do you want to call 988? And we'll talk more about 988 later, but that's the crisis line. So there's a lot of ways to get somebody help. Your job is not to solve their problems. I can't solve my problems, yet alone anybody else's. but I can say, I want you to live and I want to get you help. And so let's go find that help. So that's kind of the way we work with somebody in that regard. I mentioned earlier, hopelessness was one of the big concerns about suicide. The other was burden. I screwed up so bad that my family, my friends aren't even talking to me anymore. They hate me. Things are just changed. It's not the same. They'd be better off without me. Now, likely we've all thought about that at some time in our life in a little bit of a passing. But when you focus in on that, almost all suicides have a portion of that thought that goes to this burden thing. People would be better off without me. And if you hear that, that also is another huge sign that, hey, we've got something going on here. Yeah, people may be mad at you, but I'll guarantee you whatever the problem is right now, it's nothing compared to should you take your life. Some of the behavioral clues is losing a job, getting kicked out of school, acquiring a gun or something, or acquiring pills. If you've got 20 guns and you get another gun, who cares? But if you hate guns, you never wanted to be around guns, and all of a sudden we see you at Sportsman's looking at the pistols, something's off here. Something's a little different. Maybe we need to follow up on that. Depression is hard. Depression is like being in that tunnel. It gets you down. It's where you almost don't want to do anything. We had one of my son's friends basically lived in his basement for about a year after my son's death. And the only thing that would have been worse to me after my son died was to see other people die because of it. But he was so depressed, so down, that we just were concerned about him that he might do the same thing. Drug alcohol abuse is huge, absolutely huge, and Jim can probably talk to that a whole lot better. And anger, aggression, things like that where this person was not that way before. A lot of it is big changes in the person. Before, life is good, life is great, I'm doing things are good. Now my mind is caught up in thoughts of suicide. My mind is caught up in thoughts of I can't solve my problems and I don't know what to do, and so my personality almost kind of changes with it. Generally a withdrawal from people, generally a change, not sleeping as much, sleeping too much, the depression, different things like that might be happening. So big changes in people is something that you might see that gives you a little thought, okay? If you've got a previous suicide attempt, if you have not dealt with the trauma that caused the thoughts of suicide the first time around, those thoughts may still be with you. It's kind of like getting a sliver in your hand. You get a sliver in your hand and you kind of dig it out and you think you're okay. Well, in a couple of days, if you didn't get all that sliver out, it's going to fester up, it's going to turn red, it's going to hurt, and it's going to say, basically, I'm still here. You didn't get me. You didn't treat me all the way through. So if we've got problems of suicide, be it from abuse as a child, I was molested, whatever it is, if you don't deal with the problems that made you think about suicide, those problems are likely still with you as you go forward. So it's important that somebody who's thought about suicide deals with the problems that brought them to think about suicide. So really, it's important that we watch other people, watch their trends, and just basically keep an eye on them. Be kind to them and treat others kind of like you'd like to be treated. Okay, don't have to be your best friend, don't have to take them to prom, but just being nice to people can literally save a life. And I've heard this so many times, I can't tell you. So remember, hopelessness and feeling like a burden. And with that, I'm going to pass it on. We can come back to other things later.
Okay.
As Danny and Lance, or Danny, I'm sorry, Annie And Lance has said, I'm kind of become the statistician of the group, and there's a reason for that, and that's because every single suicide that happens comes through me in the end. I get to see it all every single time. And I say that we have a problem. We definitely have a problem. A couple years ago, we set a record in this county for the number of completed suicides in a year. Right now, we are on track for doing the same and setting another record. So far, just in the first 4 months of this year, we've had 11 of them. I just got off one 2 nights ago, a person that was 21. The ages are getting younger and younger or older and older. That seems to be the trend. Okay. When we talk about your group, your peer group, the people within your demographic, we've had 8 suicides in the last 5 years involving people under the age of 19. Okay. And what I was trying to tell the school board to try and open their eyes was, when you take a look at the number 8 in comparison to over 5 years, I don't know, 150. That doesn't seem like a big percentage of that number, really, right? But the base that surrounds that 8 is so huge. It's incredible. And here's a couple things that'll clue you into that. So in this county, in an average year, one of your peers is put on what they call Title 25 or 381 hold, which means they're involuntarily put in WBI or someplace for either attempt or an ideation. Okay, they're involuntarily put on hold. Someone is every 2.5 days. On average, your local law enforcement agencies through dispatch, and I got these numbers, every 1.5 days are responding to someone in your age group with suicidal ideation or attempt. In other words, someone has called the police and said we had a problem, and they're responding out to intervene. Okay? We talk about, and with that, for you females in here, there's twice as many females on these welfare checks than there are males. What does that mean? Anybody? It means you're not excluded. It means that you're having the same problems as everybody, and people are at least noticing our female group twice as often. In other words, they're more vocal about it. Okay? We talk about the 988 crisis line, and that line gets a call from someone within your age group, again, about once every 1.5 days. 20%, and I think Lance mentioned this. So how many people do we have in here? Maybe 30?
Close to 30.
Yeah, so on average, 6 of you, now I'm not saying that's true with this group, but in the numbers, 6 of you will not only have thought about suicide, that's 20%, but 18% will have had a plan. In other words, ideation with intent. They've got a plan as to how it would happen. That's huge. You take all of that and you make this big base of the iceberg, where that 8 is just the tip. But when you look at the huge base, it's a lot. It's really a lot. Lance talked about this, not only hopelessness, but it'd be better if I wasn't around. It would be better if, I'm a burden and people don't need me. I remember back when I was in high school, in this very high school, I was part of those cliques, and I was part of those groups that were like, yeah, so-and-so, we don't need him. I was even part of, probably at one point in time, on the other side where people are like, yeah, screw Jim. Yeah, we don't need him around. And what we need to do, guys, is take that bubble of the here and now, because that's where we think, today, tomorrow. Maybe we stretch it out into the college years and what have you, but even stretch it out farther than that. Because now that I've gone, 50 years into life, I can look back and I can see that peer group and those kids that were like, they're worthless, they're the bottom of the rung, they were the problem children, okay? They've gone on and proven that maybe that particular group didn't need them, but the world needed them. They've gone on to be some of the biggest successes and the biggest life changers in the communities. So had they left during those years and committed suicide or something, look at what is lost. I mean, you're looking at each and every one of you potentially, being the next president of the United States, being a world leader, being a successful entrepreneur, anything within the world. And when that happens, the lives that you affect are innumerable. When, you talk about this being a leadership class now, and you're a leader amongst, your group of peers, imagine when you stretch that bubble out and now you're a leader in a community of 80,000 or even more. The amount of lives that you affect and your decisions and how you go forward, is huge. So to cut that off for anyone with suicide and deny the world the opportunity for that person to make a difference, this is why, you as the youth leaders need to be involved in making sure that your entire group goes forward into life, whatever that means. We have right now this great resource, and I see it pop up on CAD, which is the computer-aided dispatch. So I see that in the office. I can see every single call that comes through in a day. Safe to Tell. Everybody knows about Safe to Tell. Great program in the schools where you can anonymously get on and say, someone needs to check on this. You wouldn't believe the amount of those Safe to Tells that come through because someone is concerned about their buddy, or maybe even not a buddy, but have heard what Lance was talking about. People start making these cryptic comments about things, and it's concerned somebody. And now they do the right thing, and maybe they don't feel comfortable confronting that person directly, so they get on and they do a Safe to Tell. And what happens when you do a Safe to Tell? Well, everybody jumps to, all right? Everybody the tree gets shook, and everybody that is anybody jumps to and goes and tries to help that person. Okay, so there's a simple solution. If you're not comfortable doing these kind of direct approach to deals, there's other things. Even in, I preach this all the time, in the law enforcement world, what we call welfare checks, even calling dispatch and saying, listen, I just got a text from so-and-so, and this is what it's saying, and I'm concerned. What happens when you do that? Well, police officers will respond and intervene. And our police officers do it so much that they're really good at it. They are really good at it because they're doing it several times a day. And, not just with the youth, but overall, I'll see suicidal subject on the board several times a day. Several times where we can make that intervention and save a life. If that did not happen, can you imagine? On average, the 25 that we might have, and you look at this big base, if these interventions, whether it's by you, whether it's by the community, whether it's by the police, weren't happening, what that number would be? Probably 10 times that. Suicide would probably, as far as a completed death, outnumber every other type of death that we have. Overdoses, accidents, homicides, you name it. Any kind of unnatural death that happens, I'll bet you suicides, if we weren't intervening the way that we are now and the way that we should be, would be huge. Huge.
I got my own things. All right. So just some thoughts for you. When my husband passed, people asked me if I had guilt, and it just has always been something that I've been able to answer with a firm, like, no, I did not have guilt for what my husband did. I loved him well every single day, and I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So I didn't know to ask these questions. I didn't know that him talking about being a burden was a huge red flag. Because I didn't know. I didn't have the training. Nobody had ever had conversations with me about this. And so we really want to empower you guys. If you know, then we can do better. What is it? Titan, Makelky. It's on the shirt. What is it?
Your word.
No, they do better. Don't be sorry, be better, right? Yeah. And I know now, and I do better. When he passed, he made such an impact in the community, and I really, wanted to, like, how can I make an impact in the community? How can you as leaders make a change in whatever you feel like you need to make a change in, right? And I really want to encourage you that small, tiny ideas, small, tiny changes can make such a huge impact. Even if you don't think it's a big impact, it's going to be a big impact. When I started with the Taskforce, 988 came out, I think, August of 2022. Raise your hand if you know what 988 is. Okay.
That's sad.
So 988 is basically 911 for mental health. And it's a new thing, so it's not like, shame on you for not knowing what 988 is, because it's so new. But we are just kind of scrambling, like, how do we get everybody to know this? It's federally, it's what the suicide hotline has been for many years. They just reduced it to the 3 numbers. We have 2 call stations in Wyoming, and one of them is here. So if you or a friend are in a mental health crisis or a substance-related crisis, you can call 988 anonymously. It does not get routed to anybody but a mental health crisis counselor. It's anonymous. If you're calling for yourself, it's anonymous. If you're calling for somebody else, it's anonymous. So I knew when I first heard that was coming out, I knew that was, it's 911 had to have come out, when 60s, 70s, and nobody knew about it, right? Can you imagine not knowing about 911 now? I think in 2 decades, you'll look back and be like, do you remember when we didn't know what 988 was? So it's something that is here to stay. And we have to spread that word because, can I share our conversation that we just had in the hallway? Makelky was just talking about how we don't feel prepared, maybe, like what do we do with a kid if they're in crisis? Ms. DePorter's in the back. She's a counselor. She knows what to do with a kid in crisis. I'm just a teacher. I kind of freeze and I don't know exactly what to do. So Makelky had an incident where a child was in crisis. He took him out in the hallway. He did the right thing. But he's far away, like the school is so massive. If he's dealing with a kid over here in the 2300s, that's a long way to find a counselor. The counselors, it's a lot of time. I talked about, well, could you, do you know that you could have called 988? And he's like, well, I didn't even know, that would be an option. 988 is something that anybody can use. A teacher can use in crisis. Students can use in crisis. Anybody can. I know that not many people know about it. So I thought, what little idea could I have in the community that could make an impact? I texted about 5 of my cop friends that night, and I was like, do you know what 988 is? And 5 for 5 had no clue what I was talking about. So I decided that I would try to push, the understanding of 988 through emergency vehicles. So I went to the Casper City Council, because I find if you go to higher up, like if you want to make a change, sometimes going to the highest possible people to ask for a change helps. I went to city, instead of going directly to CPD or directly to Evansville, I went to their city councils. And I just approached them with the idea, like, why don't we become the first? It'd be the second, but the first. I think we're the first in town now to have it in the U.S. to have an interagency 988 vinyl project. Went to the city council and asked if they would put 988 vinyls on all emergency vehicles. So now, if they're following through, and they're slowly following through, you should see 988 stickers on all fire trucks. You should see it on all CPD vehicles. Then I wanted to spread it more. I went to the Evansville City Council. Then I went to the Mills City Council. Evansville was just messaging me yesterday about their design. So within the next month, hopefully, you'll start seeing 988 decals on all of Evansville and Mills emergency vehicles. Then I was contacted because people start with just this little seed idea, right? And then it kind of starts spreading a little bit. Then I was contacted by the president of Banner. He contacted, and he wanted to get it on all his on all his ambulance. So my hope is within 6 months, you guys will, anytime you see emergency vehicle, you should see that 988. And one thing that I think was, a benefit that I didn't even expect it's training the first responders too, to be like, what is this thing that's going on my vehicle? So my advice here for a leader is just start with a little idea. If you see something that you want to change, we've had a huge shakeup in our community in the last few weeks, right? We know something needs to change. You all know when you're in these hallways, how people are treating each other, right? Something needs to change. There has been a lot of things happening with youth, and a lot of people coming forward with bullying, with kids self-harming, with kids having attempts. Something has to change. And you guys are way smarter than us and way more innovative than us. We should, you guys are the ones that could come forth with an idea. Something, instead of the district saying, okay, we're going to be doing this, although we do really want to push the district to do a peer-centered anti-bullying prevention program that takes leaders, and you guys do the campaigns to try to prevent the bullying. You guys lead it all. That's what we're pushing. But you guys have the ideas. You know how to connect with your people. You know how to take some small idea. I don't know, it could be something at a basketball game that you could initiate. Like tonight we're going to do this, and it's there, all sorts of ideas. But I really encourage you, just start with a tiny idea. Approach the district, approach city council with your idea. Then 988 is releasing locally a text feature, and our task force has been asked to really try to push that in the high schools. And the thing is, in our high schools, we have to go through the district and get permission for all the things, right? But if it came from students, if a group of leaders wanted to help spread the word of texting 988, because they're anticipating that the text feature on 988 is going to be huge for youth. You can be struggling and not have to actually vocalize. We all know it's easier to approach something via text, right, than to call somebody and confront them. It's going to be the same for 988. That's the way they know, if we could really push it with the youth, we feel like 988 can spread even more. So come up with an idea. How can we do that? What kind of campaign could you do within Kelly Walsh or between the two high schools to spread awareness of that 988 text feature? You guys do that Kelly Walsh versus NC blood drive, and it kind of turns into a contest. Maybe we can try to create something that's between the two schools, an awareness campaign. So
I'd like to go back for a little bit if we've got time.
We have
Some
20 minutes, Lance.
20 minutes. Okay, good. Thank you. Some of the things that have been mentioned, Safe to Tell was mentioned by Jim. Since the inception of Safe to Tell, which is, I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago, the number one reported item throughout the whole Wyoming is suicide, concerns for suicide, either myself or a friend of mine. Every year it is at the top, and it has been at the top by a large margin. So it's really, people are listening, people are watching, and you can be anonymous. And that's one of the great things about Safe to Tell.
Is Safe to Tell a text-based deal, or does it have to be?
I've never used it, but I think it's a text,
There's a text
on
feature.
your phone.
You can text, you can
Yes.
call.
So I think everybody should have it on their phones here as a feature. You know, whether it's I saw a gun in locker 352, or I'm concerned about my friend because they said this, totally anonymous. They'll never know that it was you, because that's one of the big concerns. People come to you and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, but don't tell anybody. I'll be mad at you forever. I've had some people that I've worked with over the years, students that have done that. And yeah, people may be mad at them for a while, but usually what happens is the people come back and say, thank you so much. You saved my life, and I owe my life to you because you did speak up. And that brings part of the prevention aspect of it back into mind. We can't read your minds. We don't know when people are really struggling. We don't know who's going to be thinking about suicide, who's going to be thinking about something else, whatever. It's okay to ask, or to say, speak up, and to say something. I need help. We all need help at some time in our life, whatever it is. There's none of us that can get through life totally on our own. From the time you've grown up, you needed help walking. You needed help reading. You needed help learning a second language, playing a musical instrument, learning math, whatever it is, we've always needed help.
I'm sorry, can I say something really quick?
Please.
I thought about this when I was laying in bed last night. As far as getting help, oftentimes if you're having a struggle and somebody's like, can I get you help? You might think it is going to a doctor or going to a counselor. There's a lot of other ways. There's a lot of ways to get help. Believe me, I think I've tried all of them in the last 2 years. There are so many things in our community that are available. My biggest help is my girlfriends and talking with my friends. When I consider like the therapy I've got through my friends, I think it's changed me more than anything. But I've literally done everything. I call it my voodoo therapy. I go and do this weird thing like floating in water because my trauma has started, has turned into chronic pain. So I've sought medical help. I've sought voodoo help. It's not really voodoo. It's kind of like a medical physical. I've done sound therapy. I've done Eastern medicine things. Like there are so many ways. There's music therapy. I've had my daughter do equine therapy where she goes and works with horses. There's so many ways to get help that's not necessarily sitting down next to somebody, because I cannot sit down and tell another person my story in a counseling setting. I don't know, some of you may have experienced that, and I know my kids too. They're like, I'm not going to go and sit down and talk to somebody about it anymore. I'm done, right? But she's willing to go and care for a horse. And equine therapy, art therapy, music therapy, all of that is available in our town. We have so many resources. Okay, sorry.
And asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. I know that I need help. I've got to stand up and be the one that starts the conversation, because we cannot read your mind. We don't know. So prevention has been really hard because we don't know, other than spreading the word, spreading education, we don't know where to go until somebody stands up and says, I'm struggling. I need help. And do it in a manner where people understand you. As I look back, I think my son was maybe trying to reach out for help, but he was doing it through drama. His drama increased. Well, as a parent at that time, my anger increased. So he was going this way with his drama. I was going the other way with my anger. We weren't talking. We weren't communicating where we understood each other. So his drama went to another level, I believe. And my anger went to another level also, but in the wrong direction. Instead of talking, we were going apart from each other. And I so wish he could have come to me and said, Dad, life's kicking my butt right now. I just need some help. We need you to be able to stand up and say, things are not going good. I need help, because you've had help all of your life. We all need help at some time in our life. It's not weakness, it's strength. So don't be afraid to speak up and say, things are tough. Things are tough. Nobody I know wants to see anybody take their life. Each and every one of you has so much potential in you. You are the future leaders of our country. My generation is phasing out. We got Jim and Miss Dundas.
Mine isn't.
No, you guys are going strong.
Far young.
But there's going to be a time when their generation phases out. And who's going to take their place? Boom, right in front of us right here now. You are the leaders. You are the future. But you need to stand up and do what's right as you go through that. 988, if you would like, I can set up a test call sometime in the future with 988. We've been talking about this a little bit. We haven't done it yet. The big thing is we need to know and set it up, schedule it, so that we've got somebody covering the actual 988 line while we take somebody else, a 988 counselor, and do a test call here. So we can call in and we can say, you know, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling, whatever, and see how they work with it. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give your address. These are people with experience in thoughts, things like suicide, that are there strictly to help you
And
in
that's
any way they
something
can.
you guys could help us with. Like, you guys could meet with Chavez and help us do the video. And I really want to try to get the youth helping us with some of this stuff. You guys would be, able to do some of the technical stuff way more than we could, and spread it throughout the schools more than we could. So.
And you're doing it where it's to your generation. When I talk, I'm just an old white-haired man. I don't speak your language. I don't do all of those things. So
Makelky does,
you
though.
guys doing it for your generation would be huge.
Do we want to give them some time for questions?
I'd love
or
questions.
do you guys, is there anything else that you want to, I know it's kind of awkward. This is an awkward topic, and questions are kind of awkward when you're doing a topic like this. So totally fine if you guys don't initially have any questions. Maybe Aaron or Makelky could.
Person, and then
Yeah.
you guys answer and pass that one. Oh, he beat me to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering about when you send them to professional help like therapists, what exactly are the kind of techniques that the therapists use to motivate them to get better?
So if we're just talking, that you've encouraged somebody to go to seek help, that's really an individual thing. When you go to a therapist and do just like cognitive behavioral therapy, that's the typical therapy is just more talk therapy. I don't, as far as like WBI, if somebody were to have to go to WBI, that is much more intense. That is all day you're doing some kind of therapy, occupational therapy. You're doing cognitive behavioral therapy.
There's a lot of different therapies that can be done, but basically one of the comparisons I use is I'm going to sidestep your question, and I hope I answer it in what I'm doing here. I look at our bodies and thoughts of suicide and everything kind of like a low bicycle tire, an underinflated bicycle tire. Let's say we have a low tire and we hook it up to the old hand pump and we start pumping that pumping that tire, and we pump that air, and we pump that air, and we keep pumping that air in, what's going to happen to that tire? It's going to pop. It's going to go kablooey. And it just can only handle so much. Okay, so the same is kind of with us. As we get the problems that we are stuck on and we deal with, and they seem to get more and more, we can only handle so much pressure too. The tire's got a little valve that you press, a pressure relief valve that brings it back into a working range. We've got a pressure relief valve that is basically getting it off our chest, talking. Okay, so a lot of counseling and whatever is talking about it. It's just, and I can't tell you how many times also run a group that meets twice a month that deals with people who have lost somebody to suicide. And I'll deal with people at any stage of suicide in my group in the evenings. However, so many times people have come to me and said, I just wish whoever had somebody to talk to. I wish they could have taken this burden that they've carried inside themselves and got rid of it. And so it is a lot of talking. It is a lot of talking. If you don't feel that you can talk directly and safely and honestly with the person, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. And that's one of the great things about the 988 people is I think they're trained to deal with this and to work with it. Suicide, for one thing, is something that most people have not experienced. So when you're talking to somebody who has not experienced suicide, you may not get maybe the deeper therapy than somebody who has been there. But it is a lot of talking, but it's that release. When I get a problem, I can make a minor problem into a major problem in my own mind. But if I can get rid of it and work with it and share it, somehow it gets better. I hope that helped. Is it kind of answered? Okay. Other questions?
So what do you suggest that if you know people who've been affected, but you're not necessarily worried about them taking any negative actions, how do you support them?
Support them by being there for them, by being non-judgmental, by just saying, hey, you've been affected. This is an effect that, as Annie said, it runs you through the ringer. It runs you from one end to the other. I was at the point where I didn't care whether I lived or died. People are really struggling. So be there for them. Allow them to talk. Allow them to talk freely without your judgment, without your saying, well, when I was in that situation, I did this. They need to unload their problems. You being there as their best friend or a good friend is doing that.
If they're okay with it, I would say personally, don't stop talking about the person that passed, right? So you can support them by not acting like their person didn't exist. People often won't mention someone lost to suicide because it's such a sensitive topic. I want to talk about my husband. He was an incredible person. I love when people share stories of him. Like, if they're okay with it, talk about the people. Make sure that their memories are still alive. That's my.
And I'll add to kind of what Lance was saying here. It's, if you're not concerned that they're in immediate danger, it's planting that seed. And I can give you a good example of this. I don't think that my task force, Lance, Annie, anybody knows that I personally have been down this rabbit hole. I came back from Iraq with severe PTSD, and I've been down this road. And matter of fact, even did inpatient treatment for that. But here recently, I just got an email, or maybe it was a text from Lance that said, so-and-so noticed the other day when they were talking to you that you're seeming kind of down in the dumps, and he just said, if you ever want to sit down and talk, I'm available. It's that seed. You may not be concerned that there's a very specific issue right now, but just putting that seed out there that, hey, if this does go in that direction, I'm the person you can come talk to and I'll help you. Simple as that.
how significant do you think the I'd say the effect, or like, I don't know how to word it, but how significant do you think substance abuse plays into the role of depression and suicide?
And this is a good question, because, and this is why I would like to, within your age group, within this schools, not just have a suicide prevention program within the youth. I would like to see something, and we've talked about it, and you can look it up. It's called Sources of Strength, but it's a peer-based educational program, basically run by the youth with a mentor, that deals with everything from bullying to maybe sexual identity to suicide to all the different things, drug and alcohol abuse, that go along with this, and kind of deal with it on a more general deal. Because I'm going to tell you right now that when a suicide is completed, there is always a link. There is always a link to something else, whether it's drug and alcohol abuse, whether it's bullying, whether it's something. I mean, suicide is just the end product of all these other things that are going on. People don't just complete suicide on a whim, at least I haven't seen it, just for the heck of it. Something else is going on where if we could impact and get help in all these areas, it affects that end product being suicide down the road and even into adulthood. And this is what I've been trying to tell, like the school board and everybody else, is even when I see suicide in 20s, 30s, and I can research back, I'm seeing that this is starting here. That the problems, no matter what it was, whether it was drug and alcohol abuse, whether it was bullying, whether it was a combination of a whole bunch of stuff, started here in this group, in this demographic, in your age group. Okay, so prevention on all levels, if we can start it right here, we're going to avoid this happening when it gets out of school.
What percentage
Can
do
I-
you see that might have alcohol or drug abuse?
So for the most part, I'll do toxicology tests on every suicide, and it is present almost all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that the person had a drug and alcohol problem, because it could have been something where it was that time specific to numb them for what they were going to do. However, it's almost present almost every single time that there's a completed suicide. I will find drugs and alcohol in the system.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you guys a quick question. Do you feel like you have been prepared, whether it's in your own home or through education, through the school system? Do you feel like you've been prepared to support somebody who is having a mental health crisis? Or do you feel like you've been prepared to support yourself if you're having a mental health crisis? Raise your hand if you do feel like you have been prepared. Okay. A couple people slightly raise their hands. Okay. That doesn't have to be. You guys can do what we do. We go up and we talk in front of the school board and we say, hey, we're not preparing our kids like we could. Oh, you have my husband's sticker. Sorry, squirrel. We feel like we could do better preparation. We feel like the schools could do better. They are doing some, but we do think the power is in you guys, and we feel like we need more peer programs that empower you guys to support each other. Y'all don't want to talk to us; you want to talk to each other, right? And so, go to the school board. Talk to your administrators. Talk to the people who can do the things, and help make a change.
Yeah, when you have adults, it's a lecture, right? When it's amongst yourself, it's a conversation. It's an interaction. It's part of the group dynamic, you know. So we can sit up here all day long and lecture to you about the things, but it's you, the leaders within your demographic, that are actually going to make things happen within your group.
Who's gonna what?
Give Lance, Jim, and
Annie.
Annie 5 clap. Ready. Sorry about
Thank you,
that.
guys.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Makelky Leadership Academy podcast, a podcast designed for student athletes who want to enhance their leadership skills, their academic performance, their athletic abilities, and develop into a better version of themselves. I'm your host, Aaron Makelky. Don't settle for being average. Leaders don't just do the bare minimum, they do more than expected. Now, it's time for the most important part. To learn from a book, close the book. To learn from leadership class, walk out of class. And to learn from this podcast, you have to turn off the podcast and do work.